Good morning. It is June the 26th, Monday. This is SOCI 6325, Summer 2015, a course in Demography. Now, we've had Prof's notes and discussions. I'm using YouTube today because Blackboard Collaborate is being upgraded, and maybe I'll do a YouTube next week when we get to the migration exercise. But let's take a few minutes and talk about where we are to get the context from where we've been to what we're going to do with fertility. This is a course in demography. We're examining this summer three components of change, of population change: fertility, mortality, and migration. We're doing it as both as formal demographers and as social demographers. If we think of an equation y equals x, y is the formal demography. Fertility rates, they vary from ethnic group, country, by socioeconomic status. So that variation is the formal demography. How do you measure fertility? And then we look on the right-hand side of the equation, and we look at those social demographic factors that might influence that, shall we say, explain the variation we see in Y, or the formal demography on the left-hand side. It's a good way to think about it, because formal demography is very valuable indeed, but as sociologists, we're interested in sort of the applied science of demography, and how can we understand dynamics in a community or in a county or in a state or in a country. And we do that by taking a more social demographic perspective. Now you'll notice in the syllabus, and again in the most recent Prof's notes, we're elaborating the right-hand side of that equation, where we would say y, which is the formal demography, equals xi, individual level, wi, which would be group, maybe race, ethnicity, plus zi, which would be place, features of place. So as we work our way through the summer and your exercises, not only will you do the formal demographic measures, but you'll do the social demographic, and as you lay out those factors you think that explain the variation of the y, you'll do it in terms of xi's, wi's, and zi's. And it'd be good to lay that equation out in your exercise Word document, so you can kind of follow that as your algorithm, shall we say. All right. Now, we're not interested really, although it's interesting, that's for sure, but we're not really interested in a cross-sectional look at, say, fertility, which is what we're talking about this week and last week. We're interested in trends, and you'll notice we're using the Weeks book, very good book, and it's all about fertility trends, mortality trends, and migration trends. In other words, we're looking at fertility changes over time. Now, since we're not going to do a linear during the summer of some years of sequencing of fertility, what I thought we would do, as you've seen already this summer, is we're going up to the U.S. Census International database and selecting two countries based on the shapes of their pyramids. I've chosen USA and Afghanistan for my demonstration to you, and you've already done some successful choosing of your two countries. Here you can see, shall we say, from a fertility standpoint, a narrower base, a wider base, higher fertility, lower fertility. And next week when we get to mortality, you'll see that the mortality experience in the USA is rectangularized. In other words, shall we say, generally those who are born live to be old age. Whereas in Afghanistan, you can see a heavily eroded rectangle enter a pyramidic shape, which reflects their very high mortality experience. So we use these as our first kind of way of capturing a couple of countries to do our study, and this is a reflection of mortality and fertility change, and you'll see how we can incorporate migration later. This is from high fertility, high mortality, to low fertility, low mortality. If we were to do the United States, this might be United States 100 years ago. I don't think it'd be quite as dramatic as this, but say 100 years ago, over the course of 100 years, and ended up in a change like this. So we're doing two cross-sectional studies, one of a low country fertility, low mortality, one a high fertility and high mortality, and use that to demonstrate to ourselves what these transitions and trends are about. Now, this demographic transition model is a good image, I think. There are a lot of reasons why this is going on. It's kind of an abstract image, but sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words, eh? And you've seen this. It was in the syllabus, as were these. And you can see pre-modern to urbanizing to mature industrial and post-industrial and all of that. Well, you can see that as we got into urbanizing, mortality plummeted, a very different transition than what we see in fertility, which continues for a little while. And we'll talk about this next week. Like here in San Antonio, for example, as the infrastructure for sanitation moved across the city, mortality plummeted. Wasn't necessarily decisions people made, the environment changed. And so their health improved, or I should say their mortality experience improved. Whereas fertility is more about individuals making decisions. And we've talked about this in the notes and in discussion, parity specific, as opposed to the natural fertility. Natural fertility would be, say, a woman just naturally having a child every year, 2 years for the 20 or 30 years of her reproductive life. But as you move into more situations of socioeconomic development, shall we say, where women have some choices about things and couples can make choices and make decisions, parity-specific decisions, about maybe one child, space it a year or two, another child, space it a year or two, and then have no more children. So you can see this squiggly effect that's going on even in the urbanizing area, stage 2, where those decisions are being made, and then in really a parity-specific situation in stage 3, the mature. So it's a good image, a way of thinking about this. Now you have a number of readings as well as the Week's textbook. And I want you to take a look at those. I've done some summaries in there. Let me back up for a second. You've got an Excel spreadsheet. There are 2 things of interest to us there that we want to